We had quite an episode of Ranking of Kings. It really feels like this episode was really high-paced. Almost was moving too fast, but still a lot of stuff covered in this episode, episode 4 of Ranking of Kings. This is my thoughts on it. I think this episode had really two major aspects going for it. One was to really kind of show us some insight into Domas, the moment that he was first assigned to take care of Boji by King Bose. And it does seem like he was excited about this. I guess it was like an honor for him, obviously, to train a prince. But you do see over time that he had these struggles. But it's really hard to get an idea of what Domas thinks of Boji, as at first it seemed like he was encouraged to do it, but he did see that Boji had his difficulties. He went out of his way to train himself in sign language with healing, which was fantastic. He was excited to see that Boji liked that he learned how to sign and that he understood him, but it seemed like he always had that misgiving that Boji would probably never be able to take on his swordsmanship. His swordsmanship was basically based off of Bose's swordsmanship, which is this fighting style that takes on all foes but never backs down. Whereas again, we find out with Boji, it seems like he learns more how to evade than anything. But even still, it does look like he gave Boji a promise that he would always keep him safe, though it doesn't seem like that's the case later on in the episode. But I think there's a lot of things that are really being shown in a deceptive way. Like, I really do think that, especially after the whole thing with healing, I think that everything that we get presented always has another side to it. So despite us seeing this whole ending with him pushing Boji, it was probably not the entire story. So to kind of follow Boji's story in this episode completely before we get into the other side of the story, yeah, it does seem like Boji goes out with Domas and this Hokuro guy in order to go on his adventure. They eventually get to a town where Boji runs off on his own and ends up giving this guy a gold coin for his puppetry performance before falling asleep and getting his bag stolen. I almost felt like, since it showed Boji specifically before they got to the town not being able to sleep, he was like excited or something like that. He was just kind of snorting out steam. Seemed like he was excited or whatever. But it seemed like it implies that he watched this story being told by this puppeteer and then he went to sleep. Almost like he needed a bedtime story before he could fall asleep. But yeah, this is our first indication that Kage's probably there. I have zero doubts that Kage is right there at his side the entire time. That maybe Bebin told him what was going to be happening, and so Kage's been at Boji's side this entire time. That was his assignment. Not that I mean, it could be Bebin. It could be that Bebin told him what's happening and then Kage chose to be at his side in the shadows, or Bebin asked him to do it. We don't really know the full story of Bebin quite yet, but it doesn't indicate so far that Bebin's on Boji's side. Because yeah, he loses his bag that has the letter to the queen's parents, and it's important, but they end up just randomly running into the bag again as they leave. So yeah, I'm sure Kage got the bag and then left it there for them to pick up. This one we had this really weird scene where Boji falls down inside of this pit, nearly gets impaled, and then ends up kind of interacting with this weird, crazy guy that was out in the middle of nowhere that was like dressed up in a chicken outfit that was teaching him the ways of, I guess, the cycle of life, where you have this aspect of, you know, you kill this boar, you cook it, and then you offer it up to this big, huge forest spirit that will consume all of the spirits and then spit out new life. And then the guy's like, hey, are you going to be my new sacrifice? And Boji runs. Guy's a little crazy. But yeah, now they're reunited. They're having a campfire and cooking something. And then suddenly these two daggers come in and hit the meat that Boji's eating. Well, it was going to hit him, but Domas pushed him out of the way. And it was kind of sad because he went to go pick up the meat again. This fox and this kit pick up the meat and run off, and then they end up finding them later dead, so that implies that the daggers had poison on them. And this gives a little brief picture of how Hokuro knows Boji, and that he was mourning the death of his family or somebody, and Boji came by and left the flower for him before he's seen Boji go to his mother's grave, where he's had all these flowers laid out. So he had like a connection to him in the loss of his siblings versus the loss of his mother. And yeah, this is when we get the introduction into the gates of hell, or this particular lands that leads to the whole of the underworld. And Domas explains that the peace is kept in this area because the best of the best knights are there, the order of the underworld. And as Domas tells Hakuro to go find them an inn, he takes Boji to the gates of hell, where he explains to him the flames coming up, and then pushes Boji into it. And he starts laughing. It almost seemed like he was laughing because he was relieved that he got rid of Boji, but then he starts crying and apologizing to Boji that it happened So it seems like he is sorrowful for what he did. But based on him kind of the night before trying to find Bebin after Boji's nearly attacked by these daggers, he implies that he does believe the daggers are from Bebin, and he's calling out to him, but it never shows what happened. So, I mean, the assumption there is that he ended up meeting with Bebin that night, and Bebin told him, hey, the order has been sent out to execute Boji, because obviously through our perspective of Daida, they had given out the order to assassinate Boji to prevent chaos. So it implies that Bebin told Domas to take him out. But again, I think this is one of those things of like, I don't think it's quite that clear cut. It's probably going to be a situation where he told him the order's been given out, lead him into the gates and let him get stronger down there. He'll be watched or something. Like Kage is watching him or something, or I'll watch him, just push him into there and we'll claim that he's been killed. I think this is all just a ruse to make the kingdom believe that Boji's dead and Domas is the one to push him in there and tell everybody that he fell into the pit and he's dead. That way, the attention gets drawn away from Boji. They believe that he's dead, and then Boji can be watched from a distance as he gets stronger and eventually come back. That's my theory. It seems, like I said, everything seems so too obvious to be this sinister, and that everybody has a desire to protect Boji. They're not willing to just throw his life away. Even though this episode, they had some scene where Domas is trying to instill into Hakuro this idea of carrying out your orders without question, I don't think it's that clear-cut. But that's cool, though. We obviously have Kage watching after Boji. He obviously helped Boji find this kook also inside of this cave because some rock hit him, and it's probably Kage. So Kage is obviously watching Boji, and so I'm looking forward to, down inside the underworld, seeing Boji get stronger as Kage's watching him. I'm not sure how long it's going to take before Kage finally shows himself. And like I said, I think probably Bebin's watching him as well. Maybe we'll get the point where Boji meets this demon that was in his father's body and gets his strength from him too. But obviously on Daida's side, which is the other side of this whole story, the ranking of kings system is coming into play. They're just coming into town. And the ranking guy meets with Appius, and they start talking about, I guess, the history of the ranking system, how if they were only ranking based on strength, Bose would have won number one easy, but it seems like there was other things that it was inadequate with King Bose. Appius talks about how, I've heard stories about this whole ranking of king system, and it seems like everybody that gets first place gets this one specific treasure from this vault, and they go either missing or go crazy. Again, hinting at that guy that Boji found. Was that guy crazy because he found something in that vault and he was a king and he just went and disappeared? It's kind of what it's implying. But yeah, jump to Daida. All this section with Daida really kind of follows the mirror, kind of giving Daida a lot of breakdown. Obviously, they sent somebody to kill Boji, and that was to really quell this possibility of chaos coming. If somebody uses Boji to come back, there could be chaos in the kingdom, so they got to get rid of him. On the other end, he also needs to gain strength, and the mirror implies to Daida that he needs to go get this strength from his father. Like he needs to obtain something from his body, the body of Bose, in order to make himself stronger. And he actually decides to, because we have two events happen. One is the ranking of king guy basically tells him to fight this golem that his father fought at some point, and he's not really pulling it off very well. And additionally, at some point, he has a dream where he sees a Pandora'S Box, and his mother's telling him, don't open it, it's dangerous. But then the mirror's telling him, no, do it, you need to do this. And he opens it, and this thing attacks him. And it talks about how Boji, which it shows Boji kind of appear in this particular dream, is his last remaining hope that'll keep him safe. And it seems like Daida calls out to his brother sorrowfully and wantingly. So it does seem like he still has this desire for Boji. Like, he still does care for Boji in some way, but yet he still can't rely on his brother. That he needs to get his own strength, so that's when he decides, all right, let's go see my father. Which really sucks, because the whole scene was like right after them kicking Boji off this cliff, and I'm like, go back to Boji. Go back to Boji. I don't care about Daida. I'm sure at some point you will redeem Daida, and Daida will actually be this great brother, but right now I don't care for Daida. I want to see Boji. I am really curious what that strength is going to be, because, I mean, the assumption was that Bose had his strength because of this demon that was inside of him. So it does imply that there's something else within the king that would give them strength. Is it his blood or something like that would give him strength? Is it a weapon, something that was buried with him? Maybe it's his hair and it'll give him one for all or something. I don't know. But yeah, like I said, my predictions on Boji's side is going to be that Kage's with him, possibly Bebin's even still watching him, that I think this whole thing was just a ruse to fake Boji's death, and Domas is in on it, but he has to, again, fake his death in order to protect him, otherwise they'll send somebody else to kill him, and that's probably going to be the argument that Bebin has. You need to get rid of him, he needs to disappear for a while, just so that we can get people off of his back. Don't worry, Kage will protect him. He's watching in the shadows, that kind of thing. It is kind of curious, during the strength test that Daida does, the guy claims that he's 90th in place, in strength anyways. So that implies there's a lot of kingdoms. There's a lot of kings. I mean, at least 90 kings. But yeah, that's my thoughts on episode 4 of Ranking of Kings. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like down below. Comment, let me know what you thought of this episode. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you can. Support us on Patreon if you can. Definitely appreciate everybody that does. And y'all take care.